Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Today, we are going to discuss, can we speak the sacred name of the Creator? And that's where we're headed today. So, this time you won't be able to see our rabbi's handsome face, though, because he's got bad internet issues, and I figured rather than canceling, we would just I'll put a picture of him up later. Right now we get to look at his what he may have looked like when he was a baby. So there's not much difference in the hair there, but I'm just kidding. You should see mine. Mine's actually getting really thin. I'm definitely going to be wearing a baseball cap for the rest of my life, no doubt.
I never had a chance. It was, my father didn't have hair. My mother's side, my grandfather didn't have hair. So my brothers don't have hair. No chance at all. So that's it. So, my early 20s, that it went, and that's what happened.
Wow. I don't want to make this whole show about hair now, but to me, I have three brothers and one sister, right? I'm the only one who's losing his hair, and I'm the only one of the brothers that wears a cap. But they say that was debunked, that that's actually not true. Wearing a hat does not make your hair fall out. But I'm beginning to argue that point. Anyway, moving on. So here we are. Can we speak the sacred name of our Creator, the four-letter Tetragrammaton? I noticed that a lot of rabbis, when they speak it, they won't speak it. They won't even spell it. They'll replace the spelling of the word, but Yud K Vav K instead of Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. Right, and so it's got me into the pattern. Whenever I type it, for some reason, I'll type three letters and then put a dash and then the fourth letter or something or a comma to kind of separate it all. But I know it's supposed to be taken with extreme care. But what I want to do is find out why, because some people are saying that you were commanded to. I think it's in Exodus or something, commanded to call out the name of the Creator. And so that's what we want to find out. So you do that. I'm going to see in just a few minutes. I want you to engage your camera, and we'll see if, in fact, I want you to go ahead and engage your camera now. And if I can still hear you without your voice being garbled, we'll keep the camera engaged, whether or not it looks clear or not. Okay.
Or you just let me know to knock it off.
Okay.
Hey, I thought the topic was about demons. We're not speaking about no demons?
Not today. Maybe next week. Okay, so did you need to...
Oh, that was my topic. I was already demons.
Engage your camera. I sent you a message on that already, and you said, okay. Silly rabbit.
All right, I must have misunderstood. Okay, not a problem.
Okay, turn your camera on, please.
Do it on the fly.
Okay.
It was.
Oh, it's not.
It keeps going off.
Oh, that means you don't have enough bandwidth. Okay, just leave it like it is, then it's fine. I'll put up another picture soon. Okay, cool. So that's it right there. So can we speak the name of the Creator? Why can't we? Why does it seem like it shows in places that you should be calling on? And can you say the name when you're in prayer, when you're reading from a prayer book?
You have a source. Sorry, one second. You have a source that says that we should be calling out His name at all times?
No, I didn't say it all time. I just said you should call out His name. But I have my own view on that thing, and it's pretty much. Huh? I didn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
The way I look at it, and the way I've taught my kids is, like with my biological father, for example, bless his memory. He, if I was ever talking to him, and I ever called him by his name, I can't even tell you how the sparks would fly, right? If I'm talking to my mother or my brother, and I called him by name, talking to my brothers or my sisters or my cousins, and I referred to him by his name, same thing. But on the other hand, if I'm talking to somebody in casual conversation and I say, well, my dad, and they say, who's your dad? Then in that time, I could say, well, you don't know him, so I'm going to tell you who he is for that one purpose. And then from now on, you'll know when I say dad, you'll know this is the guy, right? And so for my kids, it was easy for them to wrap their head around that. And I think that will also kind of give a generic sense of the sacredness of using a person's actual name or our Creator, for example. So
A name in general, like, if you would call your kids by their name, that's not an issue, right? I mean, as long as you call them the right name and it's respectful.
No, I'm not talking about the kid.
But it's totally
I'm talking
within
about
Judaism.
the parents, not the kids. Calling the parents.
You're talking about the kids speaking
to their parent. Yeah.
No, the idea, whatever. Speak about that first. I think that's easier to make a segue. That the idea being that a child does not call his parents by the first name, right? That is an utter sign of disrespect.
Right.
And whatever they call them, mommy, daddy, tati, whatever.
That's the same globally, though. It's not just in Judaism. That's why I'm not sure why it's such a difficult concept for people who are not Jewish to accept. I won't even say get. I think they get it. They just don't accept it. I'm curious as to why.
Yeah, normally, I mean, normally, right. Normally in the secular world, 100%. You don't have, kids calling their, parents by their first name. It's a sign of disrespect, right? That's really, that's really the bottom line, because you're not a peer, right? If you're not a peer, you're not gonna call them by their, by their first name. But let's say someone you're very close to, someone who's like very, a child who's very close to a friend of a parent, they're not going to call them by the first name. Maybe they'll call their auntie or uncle or whatever, but they won't, definitely won't call them by the first name. But, the idea about saying God's name, right? There's an issue saying it in Hebrew. There's an issue people writing it even in English, right? Because there's the question, if I write God's name in English, does it have any holiness?
Right.
Right. Am I allowed to erase it? If I say, if a person writes G-O-D, right? If you write G-O-D, right? I had somebody actually have that as a tattoo, right? The whole question, if they're allowed to take it off, right? Because maybe G-O-D has holiness. If it's got holiness, then you wouldn't be allowed to take it off. But, in essence, the whole question, if it does, and in the end, that if you have a non-Jew take it off, erasing God's name by a non-Jew is okay. It can't be done by a Jew. A non-Jew, a non-Jew would be okay. So that would take care of that problem. In any case, you're talking about God's name in English, right? What about God's name? What about God's name in Hebrew? When do we use that name? Right? We use that name in prayer.
So we can. Whoa. I didn't even know that. I didn't know that Jewish people use the name, and I thought they just substitute it with Hashem or.
No, I'm saying if a person's writing a letter and he says and they mention God, right? They say G-D. Okay. Right, G-D. You can say G-D. You can say Hashem.
That's just the title, though.
Yeah, it's a title. Right. So it could be. So I mean, I've gotten this question a lot. People say, why do you put a dash in there?
Right.
What's the dash for? So I said, well, it's a problem, because if it does have holiness, you can't treat it the same as you would any other, if it's a piece of paper, let's say, you can't throw it in the garbage, right? You got to double wrap it or whatever, or you got to bury it because it has holiness. It should have holiness to it. There's a whole difference of opinion. The difference of opinion whether it does or it doesn't.
Okay.
That's why it has a dash, because if God forbid you ever erase it, right? If you have G-O-D, you got a problem.
Right.
Now, in Hebrew, it's worse. Hebrew, it's worse because that is when do you use that name? Use it in prayer. Use it. Let's say make blessings.
Right.
People use it. They'll write the name, right? Maybe they'll write the name. Let's say as part of Torah literature or something. Something like that. It's a problem. It's a problem because let's say someone writes in a magazine, right? And that, you can't throw away the magazine, in a normal way. You have to, you have to be careful. And people throw out the name like it's like the greatest thing since sliced cheese. I'm going to say it and I'm going to say it again. And like what's the big problem?
Right.
So the big problem is one of the 10 commandments is you don't take God's name in vain. Now that should also apply. To a non-Jew. It's one of the no-hide laws. It's a very severe prohibition. That's why if a person makes a blessing, they make a blessing, for instance, and they're not sure. Let's say they're not sure if they said the blessing or they said the right blessing, right? And they say, okay, I'm going to fix it up. right? But we have a general rule that if I have a doubt, I don't go back and make a new blessing. Why? Because if I didn't have to make the blessing, it's a blessing in vain. Mm-hmm. If it's a blessing in vain, that means I threw out God's name for no reason. Right? I can't even emphasize, how important, that is. Because people will say, listen, I made a mistake. Or if you made a mistake, okay, you have to fix it. Right? Then you have to fix it. But if I'm not sure and I have a doubt and I have a good enough doubt, I say, okay, maybe I'm not sure I made the first blessing. Can I continue to eat? So you'll say, okay, let me make a new blessing. I'm not sure. But what's the problem? Problem is I'm going to say the name. Right? I have to have intention. We'll speak about that. Right? You're going to say the name. And you're going to say, okay, I'm going to fix up what I did. But the rabbis say you're not allowed to do that. Because if you have a doubt, you can't fix it up. Because if I make a blessing I just took God's name in vain. And people think, and it comes up actually more often than not. Let's say, people in the process of conversion, they say, can I make blessings? Am I allowed to make blessings? Right? Said, it's not a problem. They're certainly allowed to. Now the question is there taking God's name in vain? They make a mistake. Right? They're not obligated in blessing. They make a mistake. They say it again. They say it a third time. Whatever the case. Let's say they're OCD or whatever. They're not sure. They want to pronounce it again or whatever. So, you got to be careful. Right? By non-Jew, it doesn't necessarily apply. The question is, should it? Right? Because again, it's a holy name. You're not allowed to just spit it out. You're not allowed just to, throw it out there, for no reason. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that, because when a person makes the blessing in general, right? I don't know how far you want to go with this, but, when a person makes a blessing in general, you say God's name and he runs the world. You got to know where that blessing's going. Because if I don't know where that blessing's going, and I'm in the middle and I'm stuck or whatever, the blessing in vain. Right? It's only if I say the end blessing. Let's say I had intention. I have an apple, right? The apple of the blessing is Brei Priya 8, grows from a tree. And I had in mind to say it grows from the ground. Brei Priya Dama. I had that in mind, but when I said it, I said the right blessing. That's not the optimal way to do things. Because when you say God's name, you have to go. And you forget the bullet. I'm talking about the bullet. You have to know where this blessing is going, because
Rabbi,
you don't spit out God's name. I mean, bad way to put it.
I need you to repeat. I need you to repeat the last 2 or 3 sentences, because it got mangled up a little bit and I didn't hear it. Just kind of back up a little bit. I don't even remember what you were saying because it sounded mixed up.
All right.
When you're saying a blessing.
So if a person made a blessing, right? When you make a blessing, and you make a blessing, let's say over a banana, right? The blessing for a banana is Brei Priya Dama, right? It grows from the ground, even though it looks like a tree. But if I had in mind, when I said the blessing first, right, that it grows from a tree, but in the end I make the right blessing, then what I did, then I get the credit for making the right blessing. But that's not the optimal way to do it. In other words, when you make a blessing, you got to know where it's going.
Let me ask you a question.
And even if you make the right blessing in the end, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The question I have right now is, in the prayer, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz, right? Yeah. Is when it says
right,
the Adonai part, is the actual prayer the Tetragrammaton, and they institute Adonai there? And if so, that means that they're not even using the sacred name even in prayer. I mean,
no, the blessing itself consists of, I got the question. Yeah, the blessing itself consists of 2 things. It consists of, you have to say God's name, and you have to understand what that name means, right? That word Hashem in that context means that all-powerful God, right? Master. It means master, right? So I have to say 2 things. I have to recognize God is the master. God's the one who runs the world. And I have to say, well, it's actually 2 things, right? I have to say he's the master and he runs the world. Now, let's say I mention God's name, right? I mention God's name, Hashem. And when I mention his name, I don't say he's king of the world. Even if I mention his name, not a blessing at all. It's not a blessing. You need two things. You got to recognize God is God. God is absolute, right? He's the one in charge. And I have to recognize he runs the world. If I have one without the other, it's not even a blessing in vain. It's nothing, right? If you say God's name, it's not good, but it's not a blessing in vain. It's not a blessing, right? It's not a blessing at all. I need both components, right? But I have to recognize what that name means, right? When you say, let's say the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, right? That means God present, past, and future.
Right. Now,
meaning,
wait.
God knows what happens in the past.
Real quickly, this is He
knows what's going to happen now, and he knows the future.
This is a great spot to actually explain the how's it what the whole four letters and how each one is three different words composed in those four letters. Could you explain all that now? Because a lot of people don't know that, or they don't remember it.
Right, so you have Yud Kei Vav Kei, you have a Yud Nehei, right, and a Yud Nehei, the 26, right, just in case anyone wants to know. But the word itself can be made up of a number of different words, right? Yud Hei means Yiyeh, literally means it will be, future, right? If you have Hey Yud Hei, right, you take part of the word, Hayam means past, he was. And then if you put a vav in there, I mean, there is no vav, but it also refers to that. Hey, vav, hey. Hoveh means present.
Hoveh, oh yeah, that was the other one. Got it.
Right? God is past, present, and future. Now, it's interesting. So we're starting the second book of the Torah, the book of Exodus. And Moshe Rabbeinu asked God, he says, what should I tell the people? Like, what do you call yourself? Like, what's your name? Imagine, what's your name to an omnipresent being? Fred. No, it's not Fred. But what's your name? So God says, my name is I am what I will be, or I will be what I will be. Ashir Eye, right? Right? Whatever.
Right.
That's his name for all future generations. That when we say, it's interesting, the 13 attributes, right? When we invoke God, we say Hashem Hashem Kirachum V'chanu, right? And Hashem Hashem Hashem. Why do you say God's name twice? Because God is there. God is there afterwards, right? Again, he's there in the past.
Repeat that again. You said you say his name.
He's there in the future.
No. You gave an example, and then you said the reason why you pronounce his name twice. Give me the example again, because it kind of crushed up again there.
Right. The example is the 13 attributes that are said on a fast day. The Sephardic people say it every day, well, except on Shabbos, as part of the penitential prayers that we say. They say Hashem Hashem Ke'orachum V'chanu. Right? You mentioned God's name twice. Hashem Hashem. It's the God of mercy.
Interesting.
Right? That's the different names mean different things.
Right.
So why do you mention God's name twice? Right? Kel means God of power, right? Chanun, the God of compassion, right? Etc. So you mentioned God's name twice. Hashem is God of compassion. So God of compassion over here means before and after a person has sinned. That means God is still there. You have to do tshuva, right? You have to repent for doing something bad, but God is still there. It's like, well, if there's a catastrophe, where was God? Well, he's exactly where he was before. He just allowed it to happen. So God is there when a person does the wrong thing. God is still there, right? But he gives you the power to repent, right? He gives you the power to do tshuva, right? That's why you invoke the name of God, right, as the God of compassion, right? Now, there's also another name of God, the God Elohim. What does the word Elohim mean? It means the God of judgment. It's interesting, you don't see that in the beginning of creation, right? By Genesis, what name of God is used? The name of God that's used is Elohim, right? The God of power, the God of, well, not really power, but the God of judgment. Why use that name? Why did you use the name Hashem, right? The God of compassion, because God wanted to create the world, right? As it's brought down, he wanted to create the world, strict judgment. Only problem is who's going to live? Who's going to be able to survive and live their lives according to strict judgment? Now, there were, few individuals in the world who wanted to live according to strict justice. Yaakov Avinu, one of them. Rabbi Akiva, another one, and they suffered tremendously, right? But, again, you're invoking that name, that there are two sides, right? Anytime you make a blessing, you say Hashem Elohim, right? In general, you mention both names. Well, it's contradiction. How can you mention both names? There are two sides. There are two sides of the same coin, right? A person does the right thing, a person does the wrong thing. God can have compassion. If a person does tshuva, that's the name Hashem. But God may have to punish. He may have to send out punishment if we do things wrong. Right? That's the name Elohim. Now, the word Elohim, literally means a judge. That's how we know you need three judges in the rabbinical court. And that Parsha mentions the name Elohim three times.
Explain Elohim actually meaning judge. Like, I would have thought something like courts or something like, the base didn't have something to do with that. But the term Elohim, explain that, how that means judge.
Good question. That's how it's learned out. When it talks in the book of Exodus, it's named three times. So the rabbis learn out that's what it refers to. But the word Elohim in general, when you're talking about the name for right. So it's not a far stretch to say it means it means judge. In that Parsha where it's brought down three times, so the rabbis learn out that you need three of them. As part of the court. I mean, Elohim can also mean false gods, right? It can also mean false gods. But you have to. Everything's in context, so you have to see where it's brought down, right? Where that word is brought down doesn't mean the God of judgment, or does it mean false gods, right? Going after false god. There are a number of names for false gods. Right, Elohim is one of them. That also means false god. There are a number of names, number of names. But the word Elohim in general, is the God of judgment, which no one, certainly in the conservative movement, the reform movement, they don't want to hear that. Right? They definitely don't want to hear, oh God, what do you think? God punishes? There's punishment. Stuff happens. No one's in control. Not true. Right, 100%. Mm-hmm. 100% not true. Right, we say in the Shema every day, if we do what we're supposed to do, so very good. So there'll be rain, there'll be food. If not, well, that's it. There'll be famine. We won't get what we're supposed to get because there are repercussions. Repercussions for for what we do. So I'll give an example there. During the time of the destruction of the temple, one of the rabbis went up to heaven in the heavenly court, and he pleaded with the heavenly court to let him use the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, that name of God, in order to stop the destruction. He said, if I use one ineffable name of God, it will stop the destruction. And the Beis Din Shalmala, the heavenly court, answered, no dice. I mean, I don't think exactly they said that, but they said, no, this is what's supposed to happen. The Jewish people are going to go into exile, and you're not allowed to use that name. You can't use that name to stab off destruction. Okay. Now, what happens, let's say, a person knows how to use that name, and they want to use it to save somebody's life or their own life. You're not allowed to.
Right.
You're not allowed to invoke the name to save yourself. It's a very, very serious infraction. Because here,
see, that's
you're
interesting.
using on the side of holiness, but
I'm glad that you pointed that out.
Why? Go ahead.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because that would have been, in my assumption, that would have been like a final plea, because you pray, Abba, Father, help me, this, and you don't get an answer. You're like, God, please help me, and still get an answer. And finally, you get down to that point where, like, maybe he didn't hear me, so I'm going to call him by name, like my dad, David Hall, hoping it'll jar his attention, right? So why would my dad punish me or be upset with me for using it in that extreme case where I was the one in distress, right? And I made that cry in distress. Why would that be wrong?
Right. Because who put you in distress?
Well, obviously I did.
It's a famous story.
But
I'll tell you a story.
Okay.
There's a famous story with Rav Noah Weinberg, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May his name be blessed. He founded the Yeshiva Eshet Torah, does a lot of Jewish outreach. And there was a guy in this class, and Rabbi Weinberg was talking about God and seeing God in the world. So this guy gets up and he says, Rabbi, me and God are very tight. He says, you don't have to tell me about God. He and I are very close. So he's okay. Rabbi Weinberg says, tell me a story, right? Tell me how you're so close. He said, I was riding my motorbike one day. All of a sudden there was oil on the road, skidded off the road, went over a cliff. And I said, God, save me. Someone save me. All of a sudden I reached out. There was a tree. I reached out. My bike got, smashed to smithereens, and I got saved. So he says, Rabbi Weinberg, you don't have to tell me about God. God and I are very tight. So Rabbi Weinberg had a very big smile. And he said, that's a great story. He said, but who threw you off the cliff? Who pushed you off the cliff? Right? So I was now you're going to say, okay, so what's the parable
I don't mean to laugh at that, but that was, that's something we never considered.
So what's the parable? So the parable is, you're right, you're in total distress. Right? The destruction of the Jewish people, you read the book of Jeremiah, it's horrific. Makes the Holocaust look like Twinkies. Right? It looks like nothing. God forbid, not to mitigate that at all. Right? You talk about destruction in the temple itself, whatever, in the Babylonian exile, what went on. So why couldn't he have used that name? Could have saved thousands, millions, could have saved millions. Right, but God says this. The heavenly court said this is the decree. Right. We made this decree. Thousands and millions of Jews are going to get slaughtered. There weren't machine guns then; they got hacked to death. Millions. Even so, God said this is a decree. You're going to invoke my name. I'm bringing this upon them. They destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, right? They destroyed the temple. If they destroy the temple, you want to use my name, my ineffable name, in order to save the Jewish people? No. And they threw him back down. They threw his soul back down, and that was it. Destruction happened. So how could you invoke the name if God's the one who decreed it?
Right.
It's a catch-22. Yeah, you want to save yourself. You want to save the Jewish people, from destruction. But God says, who do you think's bringing it? Right? Fell off the cliff. Who pushed them? Who pushed them off the cliff? That's it.
So for me,
yeah, go ahead.
For me, it still goes back to the earthly. For me, it's like this earthly father thing. I mean, with Hashem, if I am in distress, I mean, if I really believe that I'm connected with the Creator, and I pray, and I just simply say, Adonai or Hashem or whatever, or even God, please help me. To me, it seems obvious that He's going to hear me. Why would I want to try to invoke a name? I mean, if
But does he have to give you your answer?
Right.
So I'll tell you something that maybe we'll get into another time. But there are spiritual forces, angels, we'll call it from the dark side, that you don't have to be on any spiritual level. You can invoke them if you know what you're doing. And you can have power through them. You can change certain situations, whatever. You're playing with the dark side. Right? Remember, you're playing with these spiritual forces. God puts these spiritual forces out there to do whatever he wants them to do. And if someone wants to tap into that side, they have the ability to do it. Now, that being said, you're not using the ineffable name of God. You're controlling other things. Right? You're able to control other forces. You could have power over angels. That's the whole thing with Ouija boards. We spoke about that once. Ouija boards, seances, other things. If a person knows what they're doing, right? Even though they're using the dark side, which you never want to mess with, because that could inevitably kill you. But in general, if a person uses those forces, you don't have to be on a high spiritual level to use it. So why did God put it out there? Okay, that's a whole discussion, right? But if you want to invoke his name, he put you in a certain situation, right? Whether, a person's sick, whether a person got livelihood issues, got kids issues, got spousal issues, whatever. You can have a million different issues. A person can pray and say, God, okay, obviously this is best for me. I can't handle it. It's too much. I need you to help me here. Now, what can God answer? God can say, you know what? This is going to make you squeaky clean in the next world. I'm going to put my pedal to the metal. Here comes the speeding truck. Bam, you got flattened again. Right? God can say, this is what I want for you. Now, eventually he may take it off. It may be easier, right, at certain times, but it's all part of the divine plan that even if I'm in trouble and I'm in distress, you talk about, for instance, the matriarchs, right? Sarah, Rivka, Rachel. What are the main things they have in common? They couldn't have kids.
Right.
Sarah had to have her whole body changed because she wasn't fitting to have kids at all. So why did God make it so difficult for them to have children? So the commentaries say because God likes the prayers of the righteous. Now I would answer that and say, come on, these people suffer. A woman who can't have kids?
Right.
That's like one of the most difficult things for anyone to ever go through. But when a person prays and wants something so bad, what do? They go deep within inside themselves. They'll do whatever tshuva, whatever repentance. They're going to raise themselves to an unbelievably high level. So God took the greatest women in the history of man, and he put them on such a high pedestal. And he says, you know what? All right, this is my language. I'm going to squeeze them. They're not going to have kids, but their prayers, they're going to shake the world. They're going to absolutely shake the world. Now, you're going to ask the $1 million question. Does that make sense? Does that, it sounds like a masochist. Oh, I'm in power. I'm in charge. And you're the disease and I'm the cure. And I'm going to put you down. I have to get that in at least once in the show.
Hey, Cobra,
right? So
Cobra reference, just in case you guys didn't know. That was an awesome movie.
In any case, I'm going to put you down. Right? Now, it doesn't seem fair. It totally doesn't seem fair, but if you ask anybody, if they've been in any difficult situation, and they prayed day in and day out, months, years, whatever, are they the same person before and after? Absolutely not. Are they much closer to God because they understand how things work and God can say no? 100%. Is it easy? Oh, no, it's not easy. Right? But the prayer from somebody like that who's broken, let's say someone who's poor, someone who's gone through such life difficulties, sickness, whatever, and they just sit there and pour out everything. God says, wow, that's an unbelievable prayer. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tighten the screw a little bit more because that prayer never goes to waste. Right. Person thinks, oh, I say Psalms, I say other things, whatever, and it didn't work. Right? You have someone very close to you, very sick, whatever. People prayed and they had chain lists and people said different parts of Psalms and this and that. And what happened? Person died. So people ask the question, what happened to all the prayers? What happened to all the prayers? Right? So I'll tell you a story that there was an Israeli soldier that was held captive a number of years ago. Right? Nachshon Waxman was his name. And the Israelis went in, knew where he was, and they went in to save him. And there were bullets flying. They tried to blow up the door, and it didn't work, and this and that. Meanwhile, they go in, they kill the terrorists, but this soldier was killed. They ended up killing the soldier, right? But all the other people went in. I mean, it's miraculous they didn't die. No question about that, right? So they interview the father afterwards. I mean, I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine the pain of this father. And people are praying day in and day out for the return of the soldier. And they ask him, they said, okay, what about all the prayers? Imagine a reporter. Imagine a reporter asking this question.
Right.
He says, what happened to all the prayers? All the Psalms, thousands, millions of people. I mean, I remember, I was here. People praying day in and day out. He said, what happened to all the prayers? And his father said, none of the other soldiers that went in there died. It just didn't work for my son. It worked for everybody else. A whole group went in there. And there were bombs going off, bullets flying. They killed the terrorists. Who's the only one? Who's the only one of that group that got killed? Was the soldier. Was this Israeli soldier. So he said, what do you think? All that the Hillim, all the Psalms went to waste? Didn't go to waste. It's just it didn't help my son. It helped everybody else. That's godless. That is greatness, and at a moment like that, right? Because what would be the normal answer? Well, what would a normal? Well, I shouldn't say normal. What would a person say? They say, okay, we said Psalms. We did what we could. We took on things, and what was the answer? God said no. That's the normal reaction. But prayer and all these things never go to waste. It can be used elsewhere. Right? In other words, all the Psalms that were used for that could save Jews from all kinds of tragedy. That's the power that's behind it. It may not work now, right? You pray for a person sick or whatever. They end up, they end up dying. You say, well, God said no. But you say, so what happened to the prayers? What happened to all those thousands of prayers? They didn't go anywhere. They didn't get lost. They'll be used for other things. Just not going to be used for this. Right? This was a decree.
Right.
This was a divine decree. Right? When it comes to a divine decree, like in the story of Purim, as the Talmud says, there was a decree made, and Elijah the prophet, they asked Elijah, go find out, what was the decree written in? Was it written in blood? Or was it written on parchment? And he looked and he saw it was written on parchment. So they said, okay, we have a chance. Or as my father would say, Father bless him, would say, we got to shake, right? We got a chance, because it'd be written in blood. When a decree is written in blood, there's no hope. It's not going to get revoked. If there's a decree that's written on parchment, there's hope. Now, is there a guarantee? No guarantee, right? Not necessarily a guarantee, but what do? You invoke the divine compassion. That's what you invoke. That's what Psalms are. When David HaMelech, King David himself, wrote these Psalms, it's all Ruach HaKodesh, it's all divinely inspired. Imagine what he went through. What he went through from his sons that wanted to kill him, and King Saul, and all these things. And who does he seek refuge in? He only seeks refuge in God. He said, God, you're the one who put me here. Right. You have to be the one to save me, and I don't deserve it. But I know you're going to have compassion. Right? It's an amazing thing. You read the book of Psalms, and if I were him, thank God I wasn't, but if I were him, I would say, what are you doing? I'm trying to, I want to build the Beis HaMikdash. I want to build a temple. I want all these sacrifices to be brought. I want to sanctify your name. I want to sit in your house all the days of my life. God says, I'm singing King Saul after you. Adonai, your son. I'm going to seek after you. Avshalom, I'm going to seek after you. He didn't have any rest his life. Right? King Solomon was like, living in paradise. He didn't have to fight wars. He had it easy, compared to his father. That being said, couldn't King David have said, what are you doing to me? All I want to do is serve you. Leave me alone. Let me reach high spiritual levels. God says, I will. And this is the way you're going to do it. But he doesn't complain. Yeah,
Right.
it's an amazing thing, because I always tell people, they say, wow, my life is so hard. My life is so difficult. And it is. Right? I'm not going to deny that. It is. Read the book of Psalms. Read what King David goes through and what he says.
Right.
We complain if we go into a store and they don't have our favorite, Twinkies or whatever. Hey, where is that? How come you're out of it? People like jumping up and down. I'm not saying people don't have real problems. There's sickness. There's a lot of things. A lot of things people go through. But, everything is relative. You look at what they went through. You look at what Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov went through.
Right.
Yaakov wanted to live the life, according to strict judgment. And he had a lot of issues. A lot of issues. Last week's Parsha, Pharaoh sees him. And there'd never been really sickness, or like people just died. They didn't get old and then, die. They got old. They just died. Right? When Pharaoh looked at him and said, wow, he goes, how old are you? Wow, you look really old. And look what he's been through.
Okay.
He's been through so much in his life. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I need to add another question because we've got 20 minutes left, and I want to make sure I want to make sure you have plenty of time to address this as well, okay?
Okay.
So, hold on, I just lost the screen. One moment. This is from Deanna. And she brought up, what about Deuteronomy 6:13? What are the conditions under which we can swear by Hashem's name? And Deuteronomy 6:13, I'll put that on your screen too so people can see it up there. If I can figure out the right mouse to use. Here we go. One more. And there. Okay. You'll have to forgive me for the other. Actually, I need to make that bigger. Hang on. I'll fix that right now. There. Good. All right, cool. Now it's on your screen.
So they're
Yep. It says you shall fear the Lord your God.
Yeah, go ahead.
Worship him and swear by his name. Okay.
Now it doesn't mean you're allowed to swear anytime. Right? It would sound like, well, I need God, I'm going to swear in his name. Normally what would happen is, let's say a person goes to rabbinical court, he's got a disagreement. He's got a disagreement with somebody else. And in order to convict, or in order to judge it, what happened? They have one witness. They only have one witness. So if you have one witness, money can't change hands. Right? Even if they think the rabbinical court thinks the other guy's guilty, you need two witnesses. Right? Torah says to establish in court, you need two witnesses. So what happens if you only have one witness? So if you have one witness, you make the other guy swear. Right? That would be a case you make the other guy swear. Now, it's already been for hundreds of years, but we don't allow people to swear.
Okay, so I may have missed something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why are we talking about the rabbinical courts on Deuteronomy 6:13? Not 6:13. Yeah.
Because you're asking. It says you shall. In his name you shall swear. Well, what's that talking about? It can't be talking about you're allowed to swear in God's name for no reason. That goes against Exodus chapter 20, taking God's name in vain.
Right, but so are you? Is this strictly the oral Torah, the Torah Bosh Al-Peh, that teaches this, or is there another verse that tells us more of the context of 6:13 here in Deuteronomy?
Here, if you go to Exodus chapter 20.
Okay. I mean, we know that Exodus 20 words said, "Don't take the Lord your God's name in vain." We got that, but why is this here?
No, one second. One second. Okay. Yeah, so over there, Exodus chapter 20, verse 7, where it says, don't take the name of God in vain, it means you don't swear for no purpose. Right? It's forbidden to disgrace God's name by using it for nothing.
Okay, so now you're going to pose another question, which could be problematic, and that is, well, I'm going to give you a scenario. So I was driving on this cliff, and I did ride my bike off the cliff, and I had a purpose for it, so I called out Hashem's name in vain. So if I'm allowed to do it with purpose, which is that, then why is that held against me? If I have a purpose for, if I'm going up and I'm driving through Uganda, and some guy says, "So your God, what's with your God?" And I'm like, well, have you heard of him? And I tell him the name. I mean, why would that be held against me? There's a purpose there. If I'm teaching, if I'm teaching Christians, this is a great one. If I'm teaching Christians,
so instead of saying Yud Kei Vav Kei, you can say Hashem.
But that's not. But that's not the name, though.
Why do you have to say his name for?
Because
what does saying his name do anything?
My point is, don't take his name in vain. So if I'm talking to a Christian and say, well, Hashem's name is not Jesus. It's actually, the name, and I say the name. Why is that wrong? Because that's with intense purpose.
Because that's not called a valid purpose. I can say the name Hashem without saying his name.
Okay. Now we're getting somewhere else. Where do we see in Torah where it defines what a valid purpose actually is?
So now you got to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 13, right?
That's where we're at now. You shall fear the Lord your God, worship him, and swear by his name.
Now, the obvious question the Torah does not tell me is, what does that mean? When am I allowed to swear in his name? We saw before you can't take God's name in vain, right? So that meant you can't say his name for no reason. So there has to be a reason, there has to be a case where I'm allowed to use his name.
Right.
What would that case be? So I mentioned one case. If you go to rabbinical court, that's the case. You could say, but what about saving my life? If a person's put in a certain situation, right? You're falling off the cliff. Well, maybe God wanted you to fall off the cliff. So why are you invoking his name to save you?
But you don't know that.
If you're living the life of Torah and you understand every last aspect of what a person goes through, God is putting the screws in, and he's going to see how you're going to react, right? That is the Torah philosophy. Whatever's going to happen is dictated.
So,
now,
but 13 does not say, 13 does not say you shall fear the Lord your God and worship him and swear by his name only in this case. It says you shall swear by his name.
What does it mean? I have another source to say I can't take his name in vain.
But vain is that's different though.
Taking his name in vain means I said it for no reason. I made a blessing I didn't need.
Okay, so here we've come full circle. So who has the right to say whether we had a reason for it or not? And why is it that there's only one reason if there was only one reason, it seems most obvious that it would have been put here in this place where it says, and swear by his name, you shall fear the Lord and you shall worship him and you shall swear by his name. This would have been a great place to say, but you can only do it in one scenario only.
It doesn't, but the Torah doesn't give me information. There's a lot of information the Torah doesn't give me.
Right.
Torah doesn't tell me how big a sukkah is. Doesn't tell me what a nice smelling fruit is. It's not a lemon on steroids. Right? No one would have thought that. There's a lot of information. Right? But there was a case, I'll tell you a story. There was a case that came in when I sat in the rabbinical court. A woman took a Sefer Torah. Now, no one asked where she got it from, which was my question, but she was Sephardic, so whatever. There's a question about making oaths in general. Right? Now, if a person makes an oath, right, it's also a very serious thing, even if you establish the oath, even if you keep it, right? But if you make an oath, you're still called a sinner. It's still not a good thing to do. In any case, she took a Sefer Torah. She took a Sefer Torah and made a vow against her husband. Now, if a person makes a vow, you make a vow with a very serious object. Sefer Torah, tefillin, maybe a prayer book, whatever. So the Beis Din had to give her an out They had to give her a way out so they could get rid of this vow, right? That's a whole nother thing. But one of the things they said is, why in the world did you make a Torah oath? To make an oath, right, you need an object, like a real serious, Jewish object, like a Sefer Torah, like tefillin. So she makes an oath, a very serious oath. They said, honorable rabbis, isn't that the way you're supposed to make an oath? And they screamed at her. They're like, you idiot, what are you doing? Whatever. They had to give her an opening. They had to give her an opening in order to get her out of this oath. So that means, so why? Because they don't want people saying things. Now, she might have got angry at her husband. He might have deserved it. But when you make an oath, and you're going to invoke God's name, and you make an oath, it's a very serious thing, right? There are only certain ways to get out of that oath. But she got angry. Again, I'm not saying it might not, it wasn't, it wasn't deserved. But in the end, what did she do? She forbade her husband to live in her house. And she made a very serious oath with a Sefer Torah. It's a pretty serious thing.
It is. But that's also extreme. I mean,
okay, she's Sephardic. Okay, she's much closer to tradition than Ashkenazim. Most Ashkenazim probably wouldn't do it. I understand. But even if you're going to say God's name, you have to know what context you're allowed to. The Torah doesn't tell me what the context is. The Torah just says, don't do it. Right? That's what the Torah says. Sorry, it says, in his name you shall swear. In what case? Right? The Torah doesn't tell me what case I'm allowed to swear. Right? But you might think across the board, I can say God's name whenever I want. Who says? It's a very serious thing. Even to save lives, you're not allowed to say his name. So why would I think over here? It says I can save his name and do whatever I want. Right? That's hefkeris. That's making the Torah ownerless. Obviously, it needs interpretation. It needs clarification. If you understood how serious a vow is, there's the whole question. Is it better to make a vow and uphold the vow or never make the vow? Comes out, you should never make the vow. Why? If I make a vow and I don't uphold it, that's what we're worried about. So therefore, even if I uphold it, I'm still called a sinner. Like, you just go invoke names and do whatever I want. It's, people don't understand, even if it's for a purpose, it has to be a pretty darn good one. Because you don't just go saying God's name. People make that mistake. And they'll say, but it says I can say his name. It doesn't say I can say it whenever I want. That's not the context. Right? There's specific context that we have in oral tradition. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. You got a total contradiction, right? Because you're telling me, but in Exodus chapter 20, verse 7, it says, okay, you can't take God's name in vain. It's a pretty serious thing. I can't say it for no reason. Oh, but if I have a reason, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, if I got a good reason, I can say it. Okay, so what's the reason? Maybe there are a handful of cases I'm allowed to do it. Right? They have to, that has to be investigated, right? What oral tradition says, but it's not a clear-cut permissibility. You say, okay, let's just say his name whenever we want. There's a group, I forget what their name is. All they do is try and figure out how to say that 72 letter name. I mean, I don't know. Figure out how to say it. How long does it take? How long does it take to say? I don't know. There's like a group out there. I forget what they're called. Probably not too many members. Whatever. People want to invoke things to invoke things. People are going to make up their own thing. Oh, I think it's important for this. I think it's important for that. We showed an example to save the destruction of the temple. The based in Shalmal, the heavenly court said no. There's a decree. You can't just invoke his name. I'm going to save millions of lives, right? So the question is, what level of purpose, are we talking over here? So I gave one case in court. You tell the other side, okay, I only got one witness. So I let him swear, but we're afraid he's going to swear in vain. We're afraid he's going to lie. Right? Normally I'd say, let him swear. What's the problem? Give him a Sefer Torah. Let him swear and that's it. Problem is, we're afraid that since he's got what to lose, he'll lie. And if he's lying and you just invoked him to swear, you get the repercussions of that sin also. Right? It's definitely something, you don't want to mess with. And it makes perfect sense why it should only be limited. If you're invoking the dark side, it's one thing. God gives you the ability to play with spiritual forces if you want, not that you should. Right? Definitely it's forbidden. Right? But to use his holy name and to swear in his name, we're going to say, okay, I need this, God. I'm going to invoke your name because, I'm having trouble paying my bills. You will say that's a valid reason to invoke his name. But God put you there. It's the same thing. He put you in that position. He wants to pray. Doesn't want you to invoke his name and say abracadabra, right? Abracadabra happens to be a Jewish, has to be Hebrew word.
Right. Like
right?
Abracadabra,
right? I will speak as I will speak, or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. But if God put you, think about it like this, like we mentioned before. If God put you in that position, you can't use his own name to take you out of it if he put you there. It goes against logic. Right? Simple logic.
But you also have to understand that if they don't understand that though, and when they cry out to Hashem and they don't know,
they're lacking knowledge and they're lacking emunah. They're lacking faith in God. They don't know how the world works.
But the idea is the idea of sin is to know what is correct and to not do it. But if you don't know that what you're doing is wrong in that moment, why is that held against you?
Because you transgress the 614th commandment of don't be stupid. You're taking something so holy. Just because you don't know doesn't mean it's right.
Right. That's true.
You might not be held. You might not. Might not be called. You did it on purpose.
Okay.
You didn't know.
So we need a practical scenario. I was driving through Lakeway, and I actually thought the speed limit was 45. I get a ticket because it's like 30 miles an hour. I didn't know the speed limit was 30, but I still paid the consequences for it. I still, even though I didn't know, I still have to deal with it. So I see what you're saying. Okay, good point.
Now there are cases though. Let's say someone desecrates Shabbos, even if they don't think Shabbos is important or whatever, but they've never learned anything. They're still going to pay a serious price. It's not going to be. It's not like, are we looking at it, they did it 100% on purpose, and it's a rebellion against God, and they're going to get fried in this world and the next and all that, right? Ignorance isn't bliss across the board, the repercussions. So a person can say, well, I didn't know. I just thought, well, it's just a name, so what? They understand it's God's name. You might say, okay, they don't understand the power behind it. Okay. They might not understand the power, but they, there are certain basic things that they, that they understand, right? But, in your scenario, 100% right. Officer's going to say, what? You know what the speed limit was? No, I didn't actually. So you're still going to get a ticket.
That makes sense.
That's the case. But when you're talking about invoking God's name, it's not a game. You see, this is what people have to understand because people are going to invoke it at all times. Oh, you know what? I didn't hit the lottery. I'm going to invoke his name. I'm losing money from here. I'm going to invoke his name. I'm going to invoke his name here, invoke his name there. There's no end. There's no end. Just that people don't understand the seriousness of the situation. There's a lot written on, taking God's name in vain. I remember I learned it many years ago, and I was like, wow. I didn't think it was, not like I didn't think it was so serious, but like when I started learning up on it, and saw like, what repercussions can be, for a person. I'm just using God's name. Like what's, okay. So I didn't say what I was going to do. I didn't do exactly what I said I was going to do.
Right.
Right. Okay. So what's the big vow? What's the big deal? But that can be considered a vow.
You got 1 minute. 1 minute. See if you can do it. Punch it out in 1 minute. I didn't say stop. I said you still have a minute left.
So in the end, the person makes a vow, right? A person can say, I'm going to do X, and they don't do it. It could be they made a vow. Say, but that's not the normal way you make a vow. That means you got to be careful of how you speak, Because if a person says they're going to do something, they don't uphold it, right? Who says you're liable, you're able to invoke God's name? God deserves His name to be invoked by you in that situation. You might be in dire straits, you might be suffering, you might, okay, but like that's like taking that's like abracadabra and say, okay, get me out of the situation, poof, move me over here, like playing that game Asteroids, boom, put me in hyperspace so I don't get hit by these big, boulders that don't exist anymore. I don't even think the game exists anymore, right? Whatever, right? But you're putting yourself in that situation. Everyone's going to invoke God's name because they want things to be done, right? And they don't understand the power. They don't understand what certainly what the purpose, what the purpose is. Because if they really understood, what the purpose of life is, what they're doing here, how God runs the world, how He interacts with us, you're not going to invoke His name because you understand there's a purpose.
But to understand the real meaning of life, you really have to watch Monty Python. I'm just kidding. So.
The bright side of life, All right, we're not going down that path. But
all right. Well, listen up, y'all. We are out of time. Rabbi, this is a great show. Next week, you guys tune in. We'll try to do this each week. We'll try to have the next week targeted for you before the end of the show. And apparently next week is going to be demons. Do the Jews believe in demons? If hell is not even real, well, it is real, but that's not the point. If the Christian idea of hell is a myth, why do Jews believe in demons? Oh, there we go. There's our title right there. Now I have to go back and watch the show just to remember what I just said. Hey, this is a weird life we live.
Go back. Wait, we have to go back in Freddy Krueger's dream, right? We're going to go, hey, wait a minute, I was here before. What am I doing here? And also about exorcism, right? People want to know about that. Is that a Jewish concept? Has it ever been done?
Wait. Say that again.
About exorcism.
Right.
A debunk.
Okay.
If a soul goes into a body that doesn't belong there and it takes over the body, how do you get the soul out? Is there such a thing?
Right. Wow.
Was there ever such a thing? There are stories of it.
Interesting. Oi. It's been a great show. Rabbi, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. And we will look forward to seeing you and everybody else a week from today. At the normal time, though, not at the late time, which I have presented with you today. Rabbi, thank you so much.
3:00 in the morning for me.
You're so full of crap. You're a disease and I'm the cure.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, take care. We'll see you guys next time. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. חושבים דוברים נושים בכל האופנים, זה טבעם של אנשים שונים. נזכור בסוף כולנו שותפים, חשוב תמיד להיות אנושיים. חושבים דוברים נושים בכל האופנים, זה טבעם של אנשים שונים. נזכור בסוף כולנו שותפים, חשוב תמיד להיות אנושיים. אני אתה אתם תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב